All right, deep divers, welcome back to Sip and Talk. You know, we always love hearing from you guys, and we've been getting some interesting comments lately. Some folks think we've been maybe a little too supportive of Ukraine and Taiwan.
Yeah, like we've already picked teams and are ready to rumble.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We're all about exploring different perspectives, even if they make us a little uncomfortable. So today, we're putting on our thinking caps and asking, are we misunderstanding China and Russia?
That's right. We're going deep to see if maybe, just maybe, they're not the big bad wolves everyone says they are.
I mean, everyone loves a good villain, right?
Yeah.
But the world's rarely that simple.
Yeah.
So to really wrap our heads around all this, we did a ton of research. We dug into articles, studies, official statements, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, we wanted to get into their heads, you know, try to understand their motivations, see things from their side of the front.
Exactly. And we're kicking things off with China and Taiwan, specifically this whole idea of peaceful reunification versus impending threat.
Right, because China keeps saying they want things to be chill with Taiwan, that they're all about peaceful reunification. They say any military moves they make are purely defensive.
Okay, but imagine your neighbor saying they just want to borrow your lawnmower while they're revving a chainsaw in their backyard.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to feel reassured, right?
Yeah, I see your point, and that's exactly how a lot of people see it, especially in Taiwan and the West. They see China's actions that way.
Like they're sending military planes into Taiwan's air defense zone. And just so everyone's on the same page, an air defense zone is basically an area around a country where they keep a close eye on air traffic. You know, for security reasons, it's not technically their airspace, but they want to know who's flying around out there.
Exactly. And then there's China's expansion in the South China Sea, building artificial islands and claiming territory, not exactly the actions of a country that's just trying to chill.
And don't even get me started on those massive military exercises they keep doing, like Joint Sword Plan for 2024. That's sending a pretty strong message, whether they mean to or not.
It's definitely raising eyebrows. But here's the thing. China's economy is so deeply connected to the global market conflict, would be a huge economic blow to them, too.
Right. They're basically holding hands with the global economy, skipping through a field of international trade war.
Yeah.
Would be like tripping and sending everyone sprawling.
So the question becomes, do they really want to risk all that? Are their actions a genuine threat, or are they just trying to send a message?
Well, to get some answers, we went deep into some official documents, like China released this white paper in 2022 all about Taiwan reunification. And you know what? It actually emphasizes a defensive strategy.
And back in 2019, their defense white paper basically said the biggest threat to their security is Taiwan declaring independence.
But then you've got Taiwan's own National Defense Report from 2023, and they're sounding the alarm bells like, hey, rural China's actions are making us super nervous.
It's like they're reading from two completely different scripts.
Right. And then you look at the economic side of things in 2023, the trade volume between China and Taiwan was massive, billions of dollars. Their practically economic BFFs conflict would hurt both their wallets.
So it's a complicated picture, to say the least. To help visualize this whole actions versus words thing, we put together a simple table comparing how China explains its military activities with how they're seen by Taiwan and the international community.
Think of it like a cheat sheet for understanding the China-Taiwan situation. We're looking at three main things: those military planes entering Taiwan's air defense zone, the joint military exercises, and the economic pressure tactics they use.
Right, so China says the planes are just doing routine patrols, but to Taiwan and internationally, it looks a lot like a show of force, you know, if not a direct threat.
And then there are those joint military exercises. China insists they're just training drills, like getting ready for a big game.
Yeah.
But others see them as rehearsals for a potential invasion.
And the economic pressure, China might say it's all about encouraging unification, but Taiwan sees it as a way to bully them into submission.
So basically what China says and what everyone else hears are two very different things, almost like they're speaking different languages.
And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Ready to shift gears and tackle Russia and Ukraine?
Hit me with it. I'm ready for round two.
All right, let's talk about Russia and Ukraine and get ready for some deja vu, because there are some interesting parallels with the China-Taiwan situation.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Give me the lowdown.
Well, just like China, Russia keeps saying they're acting defensively. They claim to be protecting Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine and responding to what they see as threats from NATO expansion.
Hold on back up a second. Can you give us a quick refresher on what NATO expansion is and why Russia cares so much about it?
Sure. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is basically a big military alliance. It was formed after World War II, and originally it was all about containing the Soviet Union. But then after the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO started adding more and more countries in Eastern Europe countries that used to be aligned with Russia.
So Russia sees that as NATO, like, encroaching on their turf.
Exactly. They see it as a direct threat to their security, like having a rival gang setting up shop right next door. And to be fair, even some Western analysts acknowledge that NATO expansion played a role in escalating tensions with Russia.
Okay, that makes sense. So Russia says they're acting defensively in Ukraine, but then they went and launched a full-scale invasion in February 2022. That doesn't seem very defensive to me.
Right, that's where things get complicated. There's actually a theory that Russia might not have initially intended to launch such a massive invasion.
Wait, really? So what were they thinking?
Some analysts believe they might have been aiming for something more limited, like controlling certain areas in eastern Ukraine, particularly the Donbas region where there's a large Russian-speaking population.
So they might have been trying to pull a Crimea.
Exactly. Remember what happened in 2014? Russia annexed Crimea, which was a Ukrainian territory with a majority Russian population. They justified it by saying they were protecting those Russian speakers and their interests.
But didn't Ukraine and pretty much the whole world say that was a big no-no?
Absolutely. It was widely condemned as a violation of international law and a blatant land grab. But Russia went ahead and did it anyway.
So fast forward to 2022, Russia launches this full-scale invasion targeting major cities like Kyiv. What changed? Did they just suddenly decide to go all in?
Well, there's a lot of debate about that. One theory is that Russia miscalculated big time. They underestimated Ukraine's resistance. Those Ukrainians are tough as nails.
Seriously. They've been putting up an incredible fight.
And Russia also probably didn't anticipate the strength of the international response. The sanctions imposed on Russia have been really severe, and it's definitely having an impact on their economy.
So it sounds like their plan backfired.
In a big way, it's become a much longer and more costly war than they likely anticipated. And speaking of miscalculations, let's look at what Russia said about the invasion compared to what actually happened.
Yeah, let's break it down.
So in 2022, Putin called the invasion a special military operation necessary to denazify Ukraine and protect Russia's security interests.
Denazify? Ukraine has a Jewish president. That doesn't even make sense.
Exactly. It was a flimsy justification that most of the world saw right through the UN, NATO. Pretty much the entire international community condemned it as an unprovoked act of aggression.
And then there's all the evidence of war crimes and atrocities committed by Russian forces.
Right. There are countless reports from Ukraine and Western sources documenting the horrific human cost of this war, tens of thousands of deaths, a massive refugee crisis, unspeakable suffering.
It's heartbreaking, and it makes Russia's claims of being a peacekeeping force sound utterly ridiculous.
It really does, and it raises a crucial question. How can we bridge this gap between what Russia says and what the rest of the world sees?
Right, because if everyone's talking past each other, how can we ever hope to find a peaceful resolution?
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to examine these different perspectives to understand the motivations and narratives on all sides.
Because ultimately, we all want the same thing, right? Peace, stability, and a world where we don't have to constantly worry about war breaking out.
Well said. Now, to help visualize this whole actions versus words thing with Russia and Ukraine, we put together another handy table.
Oh, I love a good table. Lay it on me.
This one focuses on key events in the conflict. The annexation of Crimea in 2014, the full-blown invasion in February 2022, and the ongoing fighting in the Donbas region as of 2023.
And we're comparing what Russia said about each event with how the international community perceived it, right?
You got it. So for the annexation of Crimea, Russia claimed they were protecting Russian speakers and responding to what they saw as a threat from the West. The international community, however, saw it as a clear violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and an illegal seizure of territory.
Then you've got the full-blown invasion in 2022. Russia called it a special military operation necessary to denazify Ukraine and protect its own security. But the world called it what it was.
Yeah.
An unprovoked act of aggression.
And the ongoing fighting in the Donbas. Russia frames it as a defensive operation protecting the people of the Donbas region, but internationally it's seen as a continued attempt to expand Russian control over Ukrainian territory.
So once again, we see this disconnect between what Russia is saying and how it's being perceived by everyone else. It's like they're speaking two totally different languages.
It's a recurring theme, and it really highlights the challenges of understanding these complex geopolitical situations.
I know it's a lot to digest. deep divers. But before we sign off, we want to leave you with some food for thought. Both China and Russia claim to be acting defensively, but their actions are widely perceived as aggressive. It begs the question, how can we bridge this gap between official narratives and international perceptions?
Yeah, it feels like we're just stuck in this endless loop of suspicion and mistrust. If everyone's talking past each other, how can we ever hope to, find any kind of common ground?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's exactly why, these conversations are so important. We need to try to understand the different perspectives at play, challenge our own assumptions, and, look for ways to de-escalate tensions.
Because at the end of the day, nobody wins in a war.
Right.
It just leads to more suffering and instability. Absolutely. Conflict has this ripple effect, impacting not just the countries that are directly involved, but the entire world.
Think about the economic fallout, for example. Wars disrupt supply chains, drive up prices, and create all this uncertainty in global markets.
And then there's the human cost. We're talking about lives, lost families, torn apart, entire communities displaced. It's just a tragedy on a massive scale.
So deep divers, we're leaving you with a challenge today as you go about your day, as you read the news, as you talk to your friends and family about these issues. Keep this question in mind. What would it take to build trust and understanding in these situations? What would genuine dialogue and diplomacy look like?
It's not an easy question, but it's one worth pondering because ultimately we all share this planet, and finding ways to coexist peacefully is in everyone's best interest.
Well said. And on a much lighter note, speaking of peaceful coexistence, did you remember that shout out you promised me?
Oh, yeah. Sunny wanted to give a shout out to one of his favorite YouTubers, Mickytolife. If you guys are into travel stories, whiskey reviews, and just general good vibes, you got to check out his channel. Micky's the man.
Awesome. And speaking of awesome, we got the nicest 5-star review the other day. It said, and I quote, "Thank you for Sip and Talk. This is the best podcast ever. Keep it up."
Oh, that's so sweet. You guys are the best. Seriously, your support means the world to us. It keeps us going, keeps us researching, keeps us sipping and talking.
So until next time, deep divers, keep those thinking caps on, stay curious, and keep the conversation going.